Day 98.
Now that I've worked it out, I suppose it should have occurred to me before. Still, the idea was so preposterous that I'm not surprised that it took me this long to arrive at the correct answer. I know now where the stranger got his pass from. I gave it to him. Today, in fact, in my office. He looked at it, and then put it away in one of those baggy pockets of his. "I knew you'd realize eventually," he said. It was the only explanation that made sense, I agreed modestly. The only way you could get a legitimate pass was to obtain it from me. Since I hadn't given you one in the past, it had to be in the future. Then it all made sense. Tell me, who exactly are you?
I suppose you might call me a Time Lord, Rassilon. What are the people that you are in the process of creating?
You're the result of my plans? I studied his appearance with unavoidable dismay. He looked so much like a tramp.
Well, something like me at any rate,
he conceded.
I am considered to be something of a maverick.
And the rest of your people?
Oh, terribly serious and dull. You'd love them. A place for everything and everything in its time. So horribly boring.
And do they remember me still?
Rassilon?
He smiled.
Oh yes, they remember him. Though the Rassilon that they remember and honor isn't quite you, you know. He's much more agreeable and saintly.
I had to laugh at that. Sanitized history?
Believe me, all of your history is sanitized. It's positively pure, through and through. Still, one or two of us know the truth. And it's not a very nice truth, is it?
This man is highly dangerous. For all of his buffoonery and humor, his mind is sharp. He hides his teeth behind an inane smile. What are you talking about?
Rassilon,
he sighed.
Don't beat around the bush with me. I know what you are, and what your plans are, because I have seen their results.
Perhaps you wouldn't mind enlightening me a little then.
Well, we could start with Remix's little virus, couldn't we? When do you intend to release that?
Now I knew his source of information, I was considerably happier about talking to him. In a few days, probably. Why? Do you disapprove?
In some respects, yes. Then there's Omega. What do you intend to do with him?
His changing of the subject was rather abrupt, but his mind is something like that of a flea, hopping from place to place, never staying still for long. I'm not sure yet, I told him honestly. Why do you ask?
If you're thinking of killing him, Rassilon, don't do it. That could be a very serious miscalculation on your part.
Kill Omega? I asked. But he's my friend.
And, of course, you'd never kill a friend, huh?
He turned very serious.
Rassilon, you have planned for a long time, I know, but I beg of you, take a while longer. Think about what you're doing and try to imagine the consequences.
Imagine the consequences, I echoed. But why should I do that? You already know the consequences. Why don't you simply tell me about them?
My people have a law that forbids our interfering.
That made me laugh, I can tell you. It was several minutes before I could stop and answer him. The fact that you are here shows how little respect you hold for that law. Just being here interferes with the course of history, and I imagine talking to me like this interferes even more strongly.
Not necessarily, he said. You see, I'm supposed to be here. I fit in here at this moment.
And you therefore have a reason for being here, I told him flatly. I should very much like to know what that reason is.
Yes, I rather imagined you would.
He stood up and crossed to the scanner. Turning it on, he brought up a view across the panopticon floor. The workmen were still expanding it, and the noise was ferocious, so he turned down the volume.
I've already seen that room, Rassilon. Every seat filled with pompous jackasses in their regal gowns, pontificating bureaucrats and venal snakes. What a future you're creating here.
But Gallifrey is safe?
Safe? Oh yes, it's safe. It's completely impregnable to everything, especially ideas. Your plans, Rassilon, will create a powerful society that is content to do nothing but sit in its academic qualifications and talk. Gallifrey is so safe, it has isolated itself from change.
Perfection does not need change, I reminded him.
The Time Lords are not perfect, far from it. They're inflated with self-importance, they're stuffy beyond endurance, and they're afraid to use their powers for good.
Good. So the man was an idealist. And what is good? I'll tell you. Whatever makes Gallifrey strong is good. Whatever makes us the masters of all time and space is good. Anything that advances that day and hour is good.
The ends justify the means, he sighed. You don't know how often I've heard that stale, weak philosophy, Rassilon, and it always sickens me. I came here to help you with your schemes, but still hoping to convince you to change the way that the future will be. To make the Time Lords less powerful, less stuck in their ways, to free their grip on the cosmos, to make them able to think again. I can see that that was a mistake on my part. You're far worse than they will ever be.
I will not compromise my beliefs, I told him. Whatever the price must be, then I shall pay it. But Gallifrey will be strong. Time Lords. That is what you call the race I am making. A good name. The Lords of Time. That is my desire, my aim. I studied his tired face again. You say you know of me, the real me. Then you know what I have already done. Do you think I could have achieved what I have without this belief in the destiny of Gallifrey? I am willing to risk everything, to create the very future that you have described.
I know, he agreed. You've murdered, schemed, and corrupted to get where you are now, and all in the name of idealism. Rassilon, what kind of a society can be based on such a start?
My dear fellow, you've already told me. The very future that you have described, one in which Gallifrey is the sole dominant force in time and space, bending even the fabric of the universe to our wills. By the fact that you are here tells me that we shall have that power. It's the culmination of all my dreams, and the end point of all my desires. I looked him over. Just the fact that you are here shows that my plans will succeed. Detonating Polyphylos will work, and we shall have all the power we shall need to break the constraints of time and space. Something occurred to me then. But if you are here, why haven't I been infected already with the immortality virus?
The what?
He looked genuinely perplexed. Threemix's little invention.
Oh, that.
He grinned again.
Well, I've got news for you. It's not quite what you hoped of it. It's not a doorway into immortality, you know. It'll increase tremendously the lifespan of all it touches, and it's going to have a very interesting side effect that Threemix will discover any day now, I believe. But it won't stop death, you know. And it's not as contagious as he thinks. After about a year or so, it will stop infecting people. After that, only those Gallifreyans born with it in their bodies will be able to use it. Not everyone gets it. It's a good job, really. The way I travel, half the universe would be immortal if it could be passed on.
Then my descendants won't all live forever?
I've got some more bad news for you, Rassilon. You will never have any descendants at all. You're the last of your line.
I stared at him, wondering what else he knew that he wasn't telling me. And you know all about my future, I asked him, including how I die.
I know something about your future, he corrected me. You and your cohorts and the people who come after you will hide or distort a lot of the truth. But I do not know anything at all about your death. In fact, in my time, there are all kinds of silly children's fables about you. One of them even calls you the once and future king, or something along those lines. It says that you never died, and simply sleep on somewhere, to awaken one day and rule Gallifrey once more.
He laughed.
And there are others that say that you were killed in a popular uprising against your incredible tyrannies. Who can say which is true, if either?
Who indeed? Well, perhaps when we achieve the power to break through the boundaries of space and time, I should be able to discover the answer for myself. After that last pronouncement, he left me to my thoughts, promising he would see me again before he left. And what thoughts I have had! He has shown me the future, and it works. Gallifrey has become impregnable. His own fears are simply a result of his misplaced idealism, a disease of the young. When we are strong, then there will be no need to change. We shall have reached that level of grace that Gallifreyans have dreamed of for generations. Perhaps we will not be able to live forever, but even he admitted that we shall expand our lives many, many times. Why, in 2 or 3 normal lifespans, what a world I could create. To be able to plan for 50, 100, or 1,000 years. To know that anything I envisage can be shaped and built. Ah, what a place this Gallifrey shall become, with my hand to guide it down the ages.
Day 117.
Well, one of his predictions has certainly come to pass. Thremix came to see me this morning in an unusually agitated state. When I got him to calm down and talk to me, he delivered some news that a few short months ago I would have considered to be insane. He has been conducting more extensive tests of his virus, apparently at his urging, and discovered that it possesses a new property that none of us had imagined, and which he, of course, must know. Total bodily regeneration.
At the instant of what should be death,
Thremix explained as best he could.
the virus restructures the body completely. It remakes it, and allows the new body to begin life afresh.
You mean like reincarnation? We start with a clean sheet.
Not exactly. We would carry across the process a large amount of our existing memories and personalities, but there'd be a great deal of change, I suspect. Features could alter. There could be minor deviations in the psyche, that sort of thing.
Then we are indeed talking about true immortality, I exclaimed. Instead of death, a rebirth. We can all live forever thanks to you.
Not exactly,
he cautioned.
I've run more tests on the virus itself. It turns out that it isn't anything like as infectious as I had thought. Most people will never be able to inherit it. Those that do will be fully protected, but the rest will never know of it, and some will die because of it. Then within a year or so it will stop breeding. After that its levels will stay constant in the body until regeneration. Then when the body is restructured, there'll be less of the virus left.
Which all means, I demanded.
Well, putting it simply,
He sighed.
about 5% of the population of Gallifrey is likely to get the virus. Possibly another 5% will die. The other 90% will be unaffected. The 5% that is protected by the virus will have extended lifespans, and when that span is over, instead of dying, they'll be able to regenerate a new body for themselves. They should have sufficient levels of the virus within them to be able to do this properly a dozen times. After that, the level of viral activity will be too low for it to work properly. Then they will die.
I thought about this for a while. Couldn't they simply be reinfected with the virus? If it worked once, it should work a second time.
Think about it,
He said.
By the time these people have been reborn 12 times, they will not be the same people who started the process. So we'd be back to the same chances again. 5% of infection, 5 of death, and 90% of nothing at all happening.
It all made sense, but there was one point to consider. So there would be a diminishing figure of people who could live beyond that first infection. And of those, there would still be 5% who could have a third dose.
Sooner or later, everyone would die,
He answered.
Oh, theoretically, some might always fall into the 5% forever, but the odds are against it.
And how about the children of those people?
Again, it's not as good as I'd hoped. If the mother is infected with the virus, then she has about a 1 in 10 chance of passing it on to her child. It seems to favor the male for some reason, about 2 to 1.
I failed to see why he seemed to be so gloomy. It sounds to me like you've done excellent work,
Hardly that,
was his answer.
I had hoped to give everyone extended life and health. What the virus will do is create an elite that will have abilities far above the norm.
Come now, I reasoned. There have always been elite groups in history. Society is governed by an elite. All you'll be doing is rewarding those people for their work in a very special way.
It's easy enough for you to say,
He replied.
You know that you will be in the elite. How would you feel about the virus if you discovered that it wouldn't work on you?
I should not be as happy, I admitted. But for the greater good of Gallifrey, I'd be willing to stifle my own pride. He sighed.
Well, I do have one other piece of news about the process. I've been able to refine the virus so that it actually enhances the body when regeneration occurs. Instead of simply rebuilding the body along the original lines, it will improve things somewhat. I've added a double circulatory system, for example. Most deaths occur because of heart failure. With 2 hearts, there's very little chance of that ever happening. Overall, I think I can say that those who the virus works on will have lifespans approaching 10 or 12,000 years. That is, of course, approximate, and dependent on chance, stress, and so forth.
10 or 12,000 years. And the idiot was unhappy with what he had done. Well, these geniuses were always a moody lot. And probably the stranger had infected Threemix with some of his idealistic nonsense. There was only one important question left. When will the virus be ready for use? He frowned again.
I don't know if we should be using it at all.
I could hardly believe my ears. What are you babbling on about now? Of course we must use it.
Haven't you heard a word I've been saying?
He asked.
If it is released, then we will be creating an elite among our own people. But we'll also be murdering just as many innocent people in the process. Is it worth the price?
I put an arm comfortingly about his shoulders. Don't bother yourself with such questions, I told him. Let me worry about the questions of ethics. When can the virus be released?
It's ready now,
he replied.
But I don't know if we should go ahead with it.
I nodded sympathetically. Well, you simply prepare it for release. Once that is done, we will talk about it some more. If you have any objections, I promise you it will not be released. He seemed so pathetically grateful as he hurried off. What a fool. Naturally, I knew he would have no objections to the virus's use. How could he have? Gimmel's man was very careful. He didn't kill Threemix until after the virus was ready for use. It was a shame that I had to do it, because the man was so brilliant. But I simply could not take the chance that he might have destroyed the virus before it could be used.
Day 118.
An historic day for Gallifrey. It's a pity that my hand is shaking as I write this. Threemix neglected to mention that there would be side effects from the virus, typical of the man. Still, the medics assure me that the nausea and general lassitude are experienced by all those who've been infected with the virus. The symptoms should pass once our systems get used to the new regime within our bodies. Threemix was wrong in one other way, too. Initial figures place the successful infections from the virus at almost exactly his 5% mark, but the death rate is running closer to 10%. At the moment, only about 10 or 12 people know the true story of what has happened to Gallifrey, and the planet is in something of a panic. I've had an official cover story made up about an old germ warfare plant having sprung a leak. To make the story more convincing, Gimmel has organized an airstrike on a site we selected as being useless anyway. Still, with 1 in 10 dying in the streets, some in incredible agony I've been informed, there is understandably fear abroad. It will calm down soon, when there are no further deaths. The public memory of tragedy especially is very short.
Day 123.
Well, I'm finally back to my old self again. Or should that be, my new self? I feel wonderful. I've been able to concentrate on matters of state once more. Gimmel recovered sooner than I did, and had some interesting reports for me to study. Naturally, the stranger interrupted me, hopping about in anger and yelling at me for what I'd done. I pointed out, quite rightly, that if I had not had the virus released, then he would not have been alive to come and shout at me. But it made no difference. Fanatics can be quite immune to logic. Then he was off on another tack, trying to get me to stop my other plans, to restructure the Time Lords-to-be into something else. Bored, I began scanning the reports from Gimmel, and couldn't stifle my derisory laugh. My dear sir, I owe you an apology. I thought it was because of your pernicious influence that Threemix became reluctant to release his virus. I was quite wrong, it seems.
Threemix, he replied coldly, was showing good judgment until he trusted you.
His reluctance to release the virus wasn't based on any moral qualms, I answered. It seems that he knew that he was in the 10% of the population that would be killed by the virus. Isn't that grimly ironic? If I had not had him killed, he'd be dead by his own hand. Would that have been classified as suicide, do you think?
Do you think that he would have hesitated for a moment to release the virus if it had meant only his death? It was the other millions that you slaughtered so casually that he was worrying about.
I was getting very weary of his pretentious prattle. Millions of people are simply numbers. He was only afraid for himself, and for that, he would have ruined the fate of the planet. It's a good job that I took the decision out of his hands, isn't it?
I don't know why I'm wasting my breath on you, he sighed. You're incapable of grasping any ethical standpoint at all.
Don't waste any further breath on my account, I said cheerfully. The next report dealt with Omega. As I had suspected, the man had turned out to be a subversive. He was slinking off to join pro-democratic meetings in secluded corridors of the capital. It was so primitive you almost had to feel sorry for them. One of Gimmel's men had infiltrated the group, and we now had the names of all the ringleaders. Most of them were unimportant, but Omega was far from that. It left me in a bit of a dilemma. Normally, I would simply have had Gimmel round up the troublemakers and quietly dispose of them, but I can't afford to lose Omega until we had our temporal control. After that, he became quite expendable. But until he triggered the supernova and the star Polyphylos, I dared not act against the other members of his group. If they should happen to disappear or die, he might turn difficult. I implemented the obvious solution. Gimmel would have them killed once Omega and I had led the fleet to Polyphylos. The only thing left now was to ensure that Omega would not return with me.
Day 140.
The final portions of the temporal flux controls are now in place and ready to begin work. They have been installed as close to the panopticon as I could manage it. Only the few technicians who helped with the work know the exact location of the controller, and they will never pass on their knowledge. I have decided to call the device the Eye of Harmony. In it, all the forces are held in cosmic balance, a true harmony, and from it the power may be tapped to control the time drivers. The technicians working on the TT capsules have done wonders. I am constantly amazed at the practical applications of pure science. Even though I invented the force barriers and fields that are used in the capsules, what Jelen and her technicians have done with them is truly astounding. They have sealed each capsule within its own separate field, virtually impregnable once sealed. Entry can be gained only through a key with numerous permutations. The actual lock code will be known only to the operator of the capsules. After all, we should not want any of them to fall into the wrong hands. Each capsule is to be fed from the Eye of Harmony, and using those chronons and the forces they generate could effectively traverse the known and unknown reaches of time and space. As if this were not enough, between them they have added several refinements to the plans. This latest capsule is the Type 30 and will feature a chameleon circuit. The chameleon's telemetry will scan the area in which it will materialize and then alter the shape of the enveloping force field to resemble some native structure in the vicinity. This will enable the capsule, as it materializes, to blend in perfectly with its surroundings. It's a very clever idea and appeals to me enormously. With the lock and the chameleon device, there is almost no chance at all that any non-Gallifreyan will ever be able to enter a TT capsule unescorted. I wonder if it might not be time for the stranger to be permanently retired. I mentioned this thought to Gimmel, who, extremely reluctantly, admitted that he'd been trying to have him shadowed. It seems that he is always managing either to give the followers the slip, or to overpower them somehow. Until now, I had assumed he was simply a nuisance. It seems that he is fast becoming a real problem. I shall have to decide precisely what to do with him shortly.
Day 162.
I suppose I should not have been too surprised, but it seems that the stranger has somehow found out that I intended to have him executed. When Gimmel's men broke into his room this morning, he was gone. I have had the Citadel searched, of course, but there is absolutely no sign of him. Obviously he has fled back to wherever he came from, and will no longer be able to harass me. Omega was curious to discover that he had not only run off, but taken several invaluable items with him. The prototype of the Hand of Omega is missing. This would have been a severe blow to our plans, had not Omega already constructed a second, more sophisticated version of the hand. We can still proceed with the detonation of Polyphylos. Along with the missing hand, some of Omega's living metal has gone also. It's an old device of his he worked on to help defend the planet before I came up with the transduction barriers. Since it is no longer really necessary, I don't see its loss as being too serious. Still, I am irked that Gimmel's men could allow a stranger to steal anything at all from within the Citadel, and then simply walk off with it. I've given them all standing orders that if he shows up again, he is to be killed on sight. I can't chance his returning for the other hand before we can use it. Given his idealistic nature, it's not outside the boundaries of possibility that he might do that.